now there's a couple questions that we're going to explore together. And these are not on your handout, but it's not an accident that you all, I'm pretty confident, know how to do every one of the things I just talked about here. Now, all I'm trying to do with that list is ask you, I'm not asking you to stop doing it, I'm asking you to do it with awareness. You see, when you do something with awareness, it's different than just doing it. If I do it with awareness, I know I could continue doing it, or I could make a choice to not do it. That's awareness. Awareness interjects choice. Lack of awareness means you're on automatic pilot, right? Now, a lot of times we are on automatic pilot when it comes to using the roadblocks and barriers. So to help you explore maybe what are some that you might accidentally be really good at, if there's any of these you are accidentally really good at, it's probably just because in your life story you got to watch somebody who was really good at it and you saw them do it a lot. And it probably happened when you were quite young. So it's pretty deeply ingrained. Oh, that's how you do it. So if I said to you, which of these did you see the most growing up? And so, very interestingly, I'd say the number one that I saw from my father was criticizing. And the number one I saw from my mother was reassuring. So, very interesting. I don't know, does anybody have a comment about what they saw as a kid growing up?
Pretty much the same.
Yeah. So we must have grown up in the same family together somewhere. Okay. Which one do you find yourself using most often? So when things are, you know, you're not having such a great day, because that's when we're more likely to do these, and you're not in a good place personally, but you're dealing with a lot of stuff, and I don't know, you're stressed out and so forth, where would you be most likely to go? And do you have an awareness about that? So, I mean, in my own case, and this is going to be connected to my life story, I will have a tendency to become more critical, to look what's wrong for what's wrong rather than what's right. I have a more tendency to divert, you know, because when I'm stressed, you know what? I don't want to deal with any difficult issues with any. I got enough on my plate already, so whenever you bring up something that's a concern of yours, I don't want to hear it. So I divert, right? And anybody else have some insights about which are the ones that you find yourself using most often in situations? See, the only reason I want you to have this awareness is that the next time you do it, you'll do it with awareness. And then you can say to yourself, oh, now should I do this or could I do something else? What's the impact or the outcome I really, really want? And all of a sudden, you now have choice in your behavior. Which ones push your buttons when somebody does it to you? That's really important, because remember we spent some time talking about triggers, right? And what sends you on automatic pilot? Well, you know, this is going to be connected to your life story too. So if as a kid you were called bad names a lot that were painful to you, name calling probably still pushes your buttons. Criticism still pushes my buttons. I have an automatic, you know, resistive negative response to it typically, unless I'm in a really good place personally, and then I can say, oh, that's a statement about you, it's not a statement about me. And it goes off, okay?
But what's the best way to deal with some of those? I mean, I just made a couple notes as we were going, and you said, we were talking about threatening, and I just sit there in my head thinking of all the ultimatums that I've heard in relationships and through life. Do this or else. And I've become really good at quickly figuring out what they're after from me and going the other way.
Well, some people...
because I got tired of dealing with people's ultimatums, so I decided, well, at that point, I'm just going to sever the tie.
Yeah, you could do that. You could send them to this class and let them become aware of their use of roadblocks and barriers. But another thing you could do is, you see people do this in the workplace all the time, if they have a boss who's really into threatening, they just go, yes, sir. And as soon as he's gone, you know, I had a boss like this. It was a tin can factory, and all we were out doing was sweeping the warehouse. I mean, I'm just trying to make some money to go to college. And we had a boss that came out like he was always yelling at everybody. He didn't know what was going on, but he thought if you're the boss, you're supposed to yell at people. We would just go, yes, sir, yeah, yep. And as soon as he was gone, man, you know, we're taking all the bent tin cans and we're playing basketball. And, you know, we didn't do anything. And because, you know, you don't want to work. You don't want to, you know, you don't feel like giving the person what they want, right? So that's the risk that they faced. Unless they're present and making you do it, threats don't really work that well long term, right? So there's a downside for the person that they don't recognize. How do you deal with it? I mean, a lot of people quit if they're in a job where that's the way the company is run. They just say, you know, I don't need this. As soon as something better comes along, I'm out of here. So, I mean, you see, you got to remember, you don't have the power to change their behavior. So if you're looking for me to give you the magic bullet to change theirs, I don't have that. But I'd like you to have choices about how you choose to respond to it. And then the other thing you can do so that you don't get bent out of shape yourself, because it doesn't feel good to be the recipient of that, is to remind yourself that their behavior is a statement about them. It's not a statement about you, even though it was directed at you. And you can start now to be curious about, geez, I wonder what the life story is of this person who feels like they have to do this in order to get anything accomplished with people. And that's going to be a sad life story in some way or another, right? Because it is a dysfunctional strategy, right? So I don't know, there's some ways for you to do different things in your head with it. Detaching from taking it personally would be huge. I don't have the magic bullet other than that. Okay, so now, where have you seen any of these lately? You know, one of the things I love about soap operas is that they have the roadblocks and barriers in great quantities as you listen to the people talk to each other. And it's like, I used to use segments in my classes to say, you want to see what this looks like? Here, listen to this segment. You know, and so, okay. Have you seen them lately? What's going on when we're more likely to fall into these? And I think that I'm more likely, I'm guessing you might be too, when things aren't going that well in my life, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I don't feel well, I'm overwhelmed, then I'm more likely. And what one would you like to do less of? And in what situations? Remember what we started with was the research that suggested that in order to improve a relationship the fastest, you just stop doing the negative stuff as much. So if you could think of a relationship that you're in right now where these things kind of accidentally rear their ugly head every once in a while, what if you made a conscious decision to just try to do it less and see what happens, right? And then on top of that, you're going to get a lot of other ideas. Now, just to show you that we didn't make this up, this is a book put together by Glasser and his wife. He's the developer of a school of therapy called Reality Therapy, which was actually really a good approach to use with juvenile delinquents. In fact, the way he developed it, he was working with a delinquent girls' school in California, and they taught him this. But anyway, he came up with the 7 deadly habits: criticizing, blaming, complaining, nagging, threatening, punishing, bribing, or rewarding, control. So you see some overlap here, don't you, with the other list? And he and his wife's experience is that in a relationship, a couple relationship, the absolute most destructive is criticizing. And you think about how often we do that. But then they go on in the second half of the book to talk about, well, if you weren't going to do that, what would you do? So they wanted to give people a positive roadmap, and these are things that we will talk about later on, but listening is huge, and that's their number one, because that's how you show support, encouragement, and respect, and trust, right? All of those things get contained in listening, and then always negotiating disagreements, and by that they mean finding a both-win outcome, which we'll spend some time on as well. And then to close today off, on the back side, you'll notice that you have and this is some more research, and this was done through the University of Minnesota. David Olson used to be there. And they did it with over 20,000 couples. Now that's a pretty substantial sample size, just because it costs a tremendous amount of money to do it with that many people. But they gave this survey, and they had an assessment where they had a way of taking this assessment where both people in the relationship took it to assess whether this was a relatively happy couple or a relatively unhappy couple. And then they asked them these questions. And so you get an idea of, if I wanted my relationship to be happier, more loving, whatever. I mean, the way I think about this list is it's a way to operationalize love. Operationalize means, you see, love, what does that look like? right? I mean, if I say that word, a different thing comes into every person's head, but are there specific behaviors that we could say that when you do these things, those are loving behaviors? Well, this gets at that. So is my partner a very good listener? And happy couples, yeah, a high percent said yes, and unhappy couples, not so much. Do they understand how I feel? Like, same thing. Do we have a good balance of leisure time spent together and separately? One of the things that's fun to watch on a college campus is two people deeply falling for each other, so that they have found their soulmate and they are inseparable. They're hanging on each other whenever they're walking around campus, and it's like they can't. And I'm thinking, boy, this is a train wreck about to happen, because what we have is two half people trying to become a whole person. And the way they try to become a whole person is they want the other person to complete them, right? That's called codependency. There's a lot of books on that, right? And at some point, they're going to have to wake up and find out, oh, that thing that I'm looking for in the other person, I have to find that in myself somewhere. Then I might choose to share it with them, but you get what I'm saying? Okay, we find it easy to do things, to think of things to do together. I'm very satisfied with how we talk with each other. 90% of happy couples, only 15% of unhappies. We're creative in how we handle differences. Now, this is where you get to conflict. Making financial decisions is not difficult. A lot of couples fight about finances, but 80% of the happies. Oh, so you get the idea as you go through this list that if you take the things they're saying in a positive way and just state them negatively, so like number one would be, my partner's a terrible listener, right? And the second one would be, my partner never understands me or rarely understands me. So you look at the ingredients of what make relationships healthy, and what you start to figure out is that what makes relationships healthy are healthy processes. So my whole life professionally has been trying to answer a simple question. What are the building blocks of healthy relationship? Can you identify what they are? And if you can identify what they are, can you teach them to people? And so that's been the journey I've been on, trying to figure out what those building blocks are. I had a lot of good mentors and a lot of good teachers who all have worked extensively in relationships. And so I started to deeply believe that there are some fundamental building blocks. I'm not saying that I know what all of them are, but I do believe that I know what some of them are. And I do know that you can put them into words, and I do know it is possible to pass them on to other people. And so that's all we're trying to do here. I'm just trying to share with you the most powerful things anybody ever taught me about how to create healthy relationship, with the hope that you become empowered, so that when you hit those difficult times that we all hit, where something in a relationship in your professional life or in your personal life is not working, you have more choice about how to approach it. Just because you have more choice doesn't mean you always get your way or you always get the outcome you want, because in relationship everybody has a veto. We talked about that. But it dramatically increases the possibility of a more positive outcome. And as was brought up, I think, by Dave earlier, it's contagious in a way. In other words, when you do something that's healthy in the face of somebody else doing something unhealthy, it changes the game. And, you know, sometimes they can't stand to be around you because they're counting on unhealthy back, because that's the only way they know how to relate. Sometimes it just stops the game, and sometimes, lo and behold, the other person who's caught in the grip of an unhealthy process are able to stop it and pause for a moment. And they learn from what they just saw you do. And my hope for your friend, by the way, is that sometime in the next week or two, she or he will have an opportunity to do what you did, because then they would also own that, right? And so it does have that effect, where it does get passed on accidentally, just because somebody saw something that they had never seen before. And so what I tell supervisors like yourselves, I'll end with this, When you become a leader, manager, supervisor, they give you a little hat. You don't know that they gave you this hat, but on the front of it, it says leader, manager, supervisor. So now you know you got people reporting to you, all right? Now there's something written on the back of the hat that you cannot see, but everybody else can. And you know what it says on the back of the hat? It says, Mommy, Daddy. And you know, every dysfunctional thing that any of the people who walk into this workplace have ever learned in their life story, they hope that it can get corrected by coming to work. So all of those dysfunctional things, they eventually land on your desk because you're the leader, manager, supervisor. And now you hope that you can give them a corrective parenting experience where they come in and they're dumping unhealthy process all over you, and you're able to offer them back a healthy process. And if you stick with us in this program, you're going to get a lot more ideas about how you could do that, how you could be powerful enough to let them dump their unhealthy process all over you, and you can stand in the face of that, receive it, and then offer them back a healthy process. And for some people that come to the workplace, that is something they have rarely, if ever, experienced. And wouldn't that be interesting to see what happens next? Now, sometimes the person self-selects out because they can't stand to be around you healthy people. They got to go find somebody that operates more at their level of dysfunction because they'd rather have the pain they know and understand than to try to reach out and go for the joy they've never experienced and they don't really think is possible.